We're going to show you something a little strange. There aren't any renderings or construction images of it, so we've put together our own graphics to try and bring it to life. It may look like something out of sci-fi, but this is a real project proposed by the US Army that will eventually, in some form, be built.
Let's start over here in the Rockaways in Queens, New York's beachfront. This is the first thing you'd come across if you were a hurricane approaching Manhattan. From here to a strip of land in New Jersey, south of Staten Island, is an enormous structure nearly 10 kilometers long. It's a mega seawall, so big it needs its own classification. This thing is one of the most controversial infrastructure projects ever proposed for the world's most famous city. But it isn't the only drastic flood defense that New York is considering. There are a number of major projects now built or under construction to stop the rising seas from rushing in. Why? Well, because it's happened before, and it's only going to get a lot worse in the future. This is the $119 billion plan to save New York. It's a popular sci-fi trope. The New York City skyline submerged underwater, the city in ruins. Our worst fears about the future come true. But is New York actually preparing for this? Well, yes. Over the last few years, the city has been quietly retrofitted to become floodproof. Steel doors go across all tunnels beneath this urban area. Critical mechanical floors are now on the tops of skyscrapers instead of down the bottom. And East River Park was built 8 feet higher than it needed to be. But why is there such urgency for all this infrastructure? On the 29th of October 2012, Hurricane Sandy made landfall, and the impact was devastating.
Deep underground, the beating heart of Manhattan's transit system, now an eerie labyrinth of epic proportions.
The superstorm hit New York with brute force. Severe flooding inundated about 17% of New York City's entire footprint. 2.5 million residents lost power, 35,000 were displaced in forced evacuations, and at least 286 people were killed either directly or indirectly as a result of the catastrophe. Seawater poured into Lower Manhattan. Basements filled rapidly, electrical systems were fried within minutes, and once those systems failed, New York's iconic skyscrapers went dark. The cost to the city was more than $19 billion from both physical damage and lost economic activity. Superstorm Sandy had exposed vulnerabilities in New York's infrastructure. It showed that the city was relying on old systems that could not protect a massive urban area, with much of its critical infrastructure all sitting at or near sea level. New York effectively had to go back to the drawing board or risk disappearing underwater.
The next year, the Disaster Relief Appropriations Act was signed into law, authorising a comprehensive examination of this very question, and the government tasked the Army Corps with answering it. They came up with 5 ideas, but we're going to show you the most radical of them.
I picked number 3.
You don't even want to read them first?
I was elected to lead, not to read.
It wouldn't be a single structure. Instead, it would be a series of man-made islands with retractable gates. A network of large storm surge barriers, flood walls, levees, and nature-based defences, anchored by 5 major harbour-scale barriers at strategic choke points. It would be a system designed to protect more than 25 million people across New York City, Long Island, northern New Jersey, and the Hudson Valley.
These movable barriers would remain open in normal conditions, allowing ships, tides, and ecosystems to all do their thing, and they'd only close during extreme storm events. It's a bit like the Thames Barrier in London or the sea walls in Rotterdam.
The Thames Barrier, like the New York Megawall, is not a continuous wall, but rather a system made up of multiple movable gates. During normal conditions, the gates lie flat on the riverbed, allowing ships to pass overhead. When a storm surge is forecast, the gates rotate upwards to form a solid barrier across the river.
Behind these barriers, the plan included raised seawalls and levees, flood-proof ports, and wastewater plants. There was also elevated infrastructure, restored wetlands, and oyster reefs to try and absorb the force of strong storms and waves.
It was an enormously bold idea, designed to hold back catastrophic storm surges rather than everyday flooding.
Now, holding back floodwaters is a monumental task, I'll give you that. But those flood defence systems have never had to sustain a thriving YouTube channel, and in my, granted biased opinion, that's just as challenging. All joking aside, running a business is a tremendous amount of work, and the last thing you need when your team has spent weeks on a project is to then spend months chasing down signatures. But that's not an issue we have anymore, thanks to Odoo. Odoo is an all-in-one management software designed with your business in mind. It takes all the apps you currently have spread across the company for invoicing, accounting, project management, inventory, website creation, and more, and simplifies it into just one. Their e-sign app is a lifesaver. It lets me send, sign, and approve any documents I need all in one place, and it couldn't be simpler to set up. I just need to select and drag the fields of my choice to add details like the signer's name and email. But I really love the automatic reminder feature that nudges people when they forget, which is the bane of any small business's existence. The status of my contracts is tracked right here, so I can see where we're at with just a glance. It's not just for UK companies either. Odoo eSign complies with electronic signature standards from over 100 countries, so I can rest assured that any legal requirements are met. Odoo lets you use your first app for free for life, so there's never been a better time to upgrade your system. You can give them a go by clicking the link in the video description or by scanning the QR code on screen. These videos are only possible thanks to video sponsors like Odoo, so taking the time to go and check them out won't just streamline your business, it will help us out here at the B1M too. Now, let's get back to New York.
Within the Megawall's borders would lie much of Manhattan, including the Statue of Liberty. Supporters of the project liked how far it was from the city, saying it would be the best solution for protecting the most people and properties without obstructing or ruining views of the sea.
Critics, on the other hand, have called it a pretty blunt solution, one that doesn't address several other threats and could actually just make matters worse.
The wall would only protect the city from storm surges and not the flooding that comes from high tides and storm runoff, problems that would come hand in hand with rising sea levels. It could even trap sewage and toxins, turning New York's harbours into a kind of swamp. The Natural Resources Defense Council pointed out that when it rains, stormwater and sewage systems can back up, allowing for more waste to flow into the waterways. The barrier could, as horrendous as it sounds, trap this waste and bring it back closer to shore. The wall could also change the natural currents in the Hudson River, having a potential adverse effect on marine life. And none of that is to mention one of the biggest issues. A giant seawall would be incredibly complicated. The barrier would have to withstand Category 3 level hurricanes, sea level rises projected through 2100, ice, debris, shipping impacts, and include a level of failure redundancy. Any barrier would need sign-off from New York City, New York State, and New Jersey, and they'd be expected to cover 35% of the costs. The remaining 65% would require approval from Congress. And even if they managed to get approval and funding, something like this doesn't exactly get built overnight. The whole project would take an estimated 25 years to construct. Now you'd think that something like that would be built to last, but as it turns out, it might not be. Opponents have pointed out that the Army Corps' estimates of future sea level rises are too low. The Corps, on their part, have argued that they could modify the design for higher seas.
But what about the other 4 options that the Army put forward? Well, 3 of them involve positioning seawalls at the entrances to various other waterways that feed down into New York City, while the 4th involved a series of smaller onshore projects. But none of them was anywhere near ambitious or as all-encompassing as the wall.
But would the wall actually work? In New York, thousands of people have objected to this wall. Public hearings were held, and the decision was put off until 2022. The result was the New York-New Jersey Harbour and Tributary Study. This report was the result of more than a decade of modelling sea level rise, storm surge, and coastal flooding across the region, and it included a revised plan for the wall. Instead of $119 billion, it would now cost a mere $50 to $53 billion. Still an enormously expensive project, it would be broken down into smaller, more manageable segments. That includes dozens of kilometres of shoreline barriers and about a dozen storm surge gates at strategic waterways around New York and New Jersey. The tentatively selected option is referred to as Alternative 3B. It's hoped that construction is going to start in 2030, and instead of taking 25 years to build, it'll take just a decade. Rather than building the full mega barrier at once, the priority is building smaller, more immediate measures that can be implemented sooner and don't require federal funding straight away. That includes 12 movable barriers at major tidal straits and creeks, as well as flood walls, sea walls, levees, and elevated promenades along dozens of miles of shoreline in New York City. These may eventually be folded into a larger system if the full plan moves forward.
But don't worry, it's not all doom and gloom. There are actually a number of infrastructure projects being built right now to protect the city.
There's the multi-billion-dollar flood resiliency project at Battery Park. That's this part here at the southern tip of Manhattan. They've built seawalls and flood barriers, and even raised the entire park to prepare it for up to 6 feet of sea level rise by 2100, protecting it for at least the next 80 years. But Battery Park isn't a standalone project. It's part of a mosaic of defence systems all over this city. The new Climate Exchange building on Governor's Island has been built with flood resilience in mind. It even has an AI monitoring system to keep an eye on storm surges. On Manhattan's Lower East Side, one of the most ambitious urban climate adaptation projects in the whole of the United States is quietly reshaping the edge of this city. This is the East Side Coastal Resiliency Project, or ESCR, and it comes from Bjarke Ingels' architecture studio, BIG. Instead of just a barrier wall, BIG has transformed the land along New York City's East River into a public landscape. Stretching roughly 3.8 kilometers from Montgomery Street to East 25th Street, the project forms part of a continuous flood protection system along the river, defending some of Manhattan's most vulnerable communities. At a cost of around $1.45 billion, it's one of the largest climate resilience investments New York City has ever undertaken, and it aims to shield over 110,000 residents, as well as transport links like the FDR Drive and key utilities that serve much of Lower Manhattan. Instead of separating the city from the river, the design creates a continuous series of elevated green islands and public spaces that incorporate flood resilience. These elevated landscapes, linked with paths, promenades, steps and bridges, combine flood protection with parks, sports fields, gardens, play areas and social spaces. Flood mitigation elements, like deployable floodgates, are integrated into the topography so they preserve views and water access when not in use. The centrepiece is East River Park, which is being rebuilt as a raised, re-engineered landscape. Large sections of the park are being elevated by 2.5 to 3 metres, high enough to block storm surges projected well into the future, including sea level rises. The scale of the engineering challenge is immense. Entire sections of the existing park have been demolished and rebuilt from the ground up. Thousands of mature trees are being removed, stored, and then replanted. Construction began in 2021 and will continue in phases through the mid-2020s, with sections of the park reopening as work progresses. In the bigger picture, ESCR represents a shift in how cities respond to climate risk. It shows that resilience is no longer just about emergency response. It's about redesigning urban landscapes to live with the water, not simply fight it. But this is New York, and this city is still going to dream up some dizzyingly audacious ideas. Take a look at Mannahatta. Proposed by an economics professor at Rutgers University, it dreams up an entirely new borough to be dredged from the sea. This could go some way to providing flood relief, and with New York's skyrocketing property prices, building more land may one day be an absolute necessity. But for now, this concept is staying firmly on the drawing board.
This challenge isn't limited to New York. Nearly 58% of the entire global urban population live in coastal cities. As sea levels rise and storms get fiercer, mega seawalls may end up becoming the norm. For now at least, a smaller solution is paving the way, but the $119 billion wall across New York is very much still on the table. Don't forget that you can't build any mega project without signing a few documents, and that Odoo lets you have your first app completely for free for life. You can check them out now at the link below or by scanning the QR code on screen. I want to say a massive thank you to Odoo for sponsoring today's video. And as always, guys, if you enjoyed this video and you want to get more from the definitive video channel for construction, make sure you're subscribed to the B1M.